Okay, so we should be live. So to everyone who's joining us on YouTube, thank you so much for coming and watching this live session. My name is Laura. I'm a senior sociology and justice studies dual major at UNH, and I studied abroad last spring in Budapest, Hungary, as part of the UNH Justice Studies in Budapest program. So that was my study abroad experience. We will talk about everything a lot more in detail, but before we get started with questions, I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves as well. So Catherine, if you want to go first.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Laura, for having us today. It's great to be here. My name is Catherine Dorte. I am an education abroad advisor for the Global Education Center. Currently working from home, but hopefully be back on campus soon. Excited to be back on campus as soon as we are able, and excited to meet students in full.
Awesome. Trisha?
So hi, I'm Trisha. I'm a senior in the Community and Environmental Planning program, and I also have a minor in Environmental Conservation and Sustainability. I did the EcoQuest program last spring. EcoQuest is a study abroad sustainability and conservation program that's run in New Zealand.
Now I'll finish this up. My name is Caroline Wilson. I'm a senior recreation management and policy program and event management major. I have minors in business administration, tourism, and hospitality. And last spring, I studied abroad in Florence, Italy, where I studied at the Florence University of the Arts through a UNH-approved program called Academic Study Abroad, Away, ASA.
Awesome. And before we get too far into any sort of logistics questions, I just want to say again that if you've joined us on YouTube, please feel free to leave any questions you have for us in the chat. We will definitely prioritize getting your specific questions answered. But until that gets going, I'll just ask Trisha and Caroline both to talk just for a second about why they chose this country that they studied abroad in and that specific program. So Caroline, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I decided to come to UNH because of all the study abroad opportunities. I'm from Durham, New Hampshire, so going to the school that was in my backyard wasn't super appealing at first, but then I learned about all the different opportunities I had to study somewhere else. So I ultimately ended up coming to UNH because of those opportunities. I chose Florence, Italy, because it's a little sentimental. It's my grandmother's favorite city, and she's traveled to Florence at least a dozen times. It's her favorite place in the world. And my grandfather had told her she wasn't allowed to, they weren't allowed to go back there. And she told me the only way my grandfather would let her go back to Florence is if I was there. So that was kind of a motivating factor for me to go to Florence because I just heard such great things. So I chose Italy because I didn't know anything about the Italian culture. It's very stereotypical to choosing Italy. I love pasta. And that was an opportunity that I was excited to kind of take. And it worked out really well for the month that we were there before the pandemic happened and we had to come home. But it was really incredible. It was my favorite month of my whole entire 4 years here at UNH.
It's a good reason. Trisha, what about you?
So I didn't know about the amount of study abroad programs before I came here. My sister studied abroad in Italy as well under a nutrition program. So I heard about my study abroad program in a first year class here at UNH about conservation. And it kind of made me more interested in the program as well, because any major can do EcoQuest and learn more about environmental conservation and sustainability, but it was really geared towards ECS folks. And so it really inspired me to pursue a minor in ECS because that completed my minor. But I chose New Zealand because it's just so far away and I really I'm an in-state student. I'm from Lancaster, New Hampshire. And so I wanted to go far away and really experience the world. I also, similarly, my experience was cut short. New Zealand was a bit different in the situation as far as COVID goes, because I ended up getting 7 weeks there, and I'm really grateful for the amount of time I got to be there and the work I got to do. And something I unfortunately didn't get to do, but and like every other semester has been able to do, is direct field research. And so working in the field, gathering data, and then taking the time to analyze it. And so that's just amazing professional like development to get. And so I'm really bummed that that was very altered for me, but I'm also just really appreciative of the experience that I got.
Yeah, that's an awesome opportunity. I'll wrap up just with why I went to Budapest, just because it's a little bit different. Like I mentioned, I did a UNH managed program, which means that I traveled with a professor from UNH in the Justice Studies program, and I think it was 14 other UNH students. So it was really convenient for me as a student to be able to essentially wrap up my second major while I was abroad. I know a lot of times study abroad programs can count for discovery or like gen ed courses or foreign languages and stuff like that. But it was really valuable in terms of getting everything into 4 years and still graduating on time to be able to go and be taking upper level courses in my major. And that's not something that's just unique to justice studies. We have quite a few UNH managed programs sort of across the different colleges. But I would definitely encourage checking those out. And Catherine, if you had a student come in who knew they wanted to go abroad but didn't have much direction or a particular place they were interested in, what are sort of the first steps that you would suggest for them?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's often what students will do, is that they'll be really excited and know they want to do it, but they may not necessarily think or have planned out, of course, where is the best fit. So that's really what we do as advisors, is kind of just help students get past that overwhelming feeling of I could go anywhere, or there are some specific programs that I want to go to, but what are there any other alternatives for me? So we are there to help counsel students through that, advise them about cost, curriculum, and culture. Those are kind of our 3 pillars that we help students think through as they're planning the process and the program fit. So yeah, that's what we're there to do. Yes, like it can be overwhelming in the beginning, but we help you get past that.
Great. And just to sort of get it out of the way, because I know from giving tours on campus that it's a really common question, but can every student study abroad, like regardless of what major you're in or what college? Is it an option for everyone?
As long as you plan ahead. Honestly, of course, there are some majors that are much more flexible than others, and that is a reality that we have to advise for. But you do, if you come in your first year and you talk to us, let's think about when is the best time for you to study abroad. That's often the number one question, is when, and then the how comes after that. So having that relationship with your academic advisor right out of the gate when you come in as a first year is so important, because they will be your advocate, they will be your advisor, they will be the people that really will help you understand what you can do to make this happen within your plan of study. And that's really, really important, because then and my colleagues can certainly help advise, well, what program works? Can you take discovery classes? Do you have to take major classes? How much flexibility do you have? So on and so on. And so those conversations need to happen, especially in the early stages. It's never too early to talk about it until you actually get to that point where you're ready to apply. That comes a little later, but the conversations can start early.
That makes sense. Caroline talked about it as something that she was interested in even before coming to UNH. It was the same for me. And Trisha obviously learned about hers in her first year. So I think across the board, we would all probably agree that the earlier you can at least put it out there into the universe that it's something you want to do, the better it'll be, and the more easy the process will be for you, which is always more enjoyable. Just sort of one last logistics question before we talk about all the fun things, like what were our favorite things and what's hard about studying abroad. But just to touch on the cost of study abroad for UNH students, I can share my own experience, and then we can kind of talk about how a lot of the programs break down. But if you do a UNH managed, and jump in if this sounds wrong, Catherine, but UNH managed or UNH exchange program, then you'll be paying your UNH tuition. So whatever financial aid you get, whether that's from FAFSA or that's merit aid, will travel with you when you go abroad. And since I did a UNH program, that's what worked out. For me specifically, it actually ended up being a little bit cheaper to study abroad because the cost of living in Hungary is lower than the cost of living here. So the difference was in like the room and board and in food and stuff like that. But obviously that is very dependent on where you go, and something that you can talk about with a study abroad advisor and sort of work out the details on. Does anybody else have anything to add there?
So I do just want to also emphasize the fact that you can take your financial aid with you. I know you already said it, but I can't emphasize enough how important that is for students. And we focus a lot, especially in the beginning, on, okay, what are your costs going to be? Let's look at the real picture here. How much is it going to cost to go to Australia as opposed to Thailand, as opposed to the UK or the Netherlands, right? Or France. So, I mean, it's just that every single country has its own currency, obviously, and you have to think about that based in the context of where are you going? What is that cost of living? So, Laura, thank you for pointing that out, because there are a lot of moving parts to this. So you just need to, we give you the tools to help you think that through, but having that sort of comfort that you can take your aid with you is a nice benefit.
I know I did a UNH approved program. So unlike Laura, I traveled with a program outside of UNH. There were other UNH students there, but since this is it was an overarching program, like my roommates were from Alabama, and they went to schools in Massachusetts. So I had a variety of different schools all coming together, and we were able to pay that company directly. And my financial aid also traveled with the program as well, which was really nice that I had that opportunity as well.
I can speak to EcoQuest being a little bit different. So I think it was like a UNH affiliate program. I'm not sure if I'm using the correct wording, but we also had students from like different colleges coming and joining us for the program, but it's rooted through UNH, like UNH is the main college. As far as like the money, like tuition aspect, the EcoQuest like tuition is about the same as out-of-state tuition. So it was a little more expensive for me personally, just because I'm an in-state student, but you can apply for scholarships with this program, and I'm almost positive your financial aid carries with you.
Yeah, that's a great point too, that there are sometimes like program specific scholarships, whether those be for programs run through UNH, or if you're doing a program that you found somewhere else and you're getting your like general education credits, there might be scholarships there too. So it's definitely something to look into ahead of time and plan for as much as you can. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. Just a reminder to everyone watching, please ask away if there's anything you're curious about, but we'll sort of transition into maybe some of the more like fun or exciting topics about why study abroad is important. I'll sort of throw out a few questions and you can each take it in whatever direction you want, but why is studying abroad important? Why is it something that was important to you? What are the benefits of studying abroad, and what are the challenges of studying abroad? So big questions, but Catherine, if you want to talk first about why you think study abroad is important.
Okay, so obviously I've made this my career. So I do have somewhat of a unique perspective. I'm originally from the UK, and when I was planning to study abroad, all that was open to me were exchange programs. And so I was essentially, I studied here in the United States. And so I was really strongly encouraged to study classes that would count for my majors. I mean, that was the only choice I had. So that's kind of been my mindset, especially, I see how important it is for students to take classes that push them, but also that they can feel like they have a chance to learn something new that they wouldn't learn when they're at UNH. And so I also see the value in professional development. But again, that does come from a personal place because I did make this my career and I was an exchange student. But I also truly believe that employers love students that have studied abroad. I mean, I've never come across an employer that says, oh, we had nothing to talk about when that student studied abroad, because in the interview process, you've just had all these experiences and you pushed yourself to do something that pushed you above and beyond the classroom. And so employers love it. So it's a great resume builder, and just those skills that you build up that you can put on your resume are great. But above and beyond that as well is the personal piece, right? You know, just to be able to leave the United States, have that cultural appreciation, understand what it's like to learn another language, to really make new friends. I mean, again, you wouldn't necessarily have that opportunity unless you leave. And so really, really important. And, you know, I am biased. I'm a product of study abroad, but I also do it as a career. I made it my career, but I see the benefits every day in my students from UNH. They change, they develop. I just got off a call about half an hour ago with one of my students who's now going to graduate school in Sweden. And he's like an amazing guy. And he's like, yep, I want to go back. So, you know, that can happen too.
Awesome. And before I toss it to anybody else, we do have one question in the chat that we can cover just about if study abroad opportunities are only open to like seniors or upperclassmen, or if it's something that you can do as an underclassman as well. And I know from personal experience and my friends that it's something you can definitely do sophomore year. Again, that takes some planning, like right from the get-go. It's also something that you can do twice if you want. There are plenty of people who have gone abroad twice. But I'm not 100% sure about freshman year. Is that something that first year students can explore, Catherine?
Not at this point,
okay.
Unfortunately. There, you know, I have to say, I think it would, depending on the student and what they want to do, it could be a possibility. But for right now, it's UNH doesn't allow it.
Yeah.
You have to have at least 32 semester credit hours under your belt and get the experience, and then, yeah. Sophomore, junior, and sometimes senior year is when students study abroad. But who knows, that may change in the future. We don't know.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's always good. I mean, I would say enjoy your first few semesters in Durham while you can, and then think about exploring all of the other things that you can do. Okay, Caroline, any thoughts about like what your favorite parts were, what the hardest parts of study abroad were?
Yeah, so I think the hardest part for me was initially at the beginning. I realized that the longest I had ever been away from Durham was 2 weeks, because I've lived in Durham for the past 16 years, and I chose to go to school in my hometown. So this was my first like leaving home kind of moment. And it was in a whole new country where I didn't know the language, and I was as far away as I possibly could have been from Durham. But ultimately, after I kind of got over that hurdle, it was the best thing ever, just being able to leave and experience something new. Like classes I was taking were so much fun. I took a class on wine tasting. I took a pasta making and the history of pasta class. I took a class on sketching Florence. So every single day, our professor would take us out to a new landmark, and we'd just sit there for an hour and just sketch. And that was just so much fun to learn about the architecture, the history, the artwork, in just a whole new place, and just exploring, traveling around Europe. Even though I was only there for 5 weeks, I got to go to Switzerland. I went to Vienna, I went to Budapest, and I traveled all around Italy. I went to Rome, I went to Venice. I was able to just really take advantage of the opportunities that were available for me in Florence and in Europe in general. So ultimately ended up being like the most exciting thing. Definitely I was homesick at the beginning, but once I realized how much fun I was having and everything that I possibly could be doing while I was here, I didn't want to go back to Durham. And I just wanted to stay there for as long as I possibly could. But now we're back in Durham. we love Durham. We're it's always good to be home, but I definitely keep getting all these Snapchat memories or memories on my phone of when I was abroad, and just having those memories is fun and a little sad all at the same time.
It definitely is. It's wild to see all the memories because it feels like we were all abroad last spring, but I don't know about you guys, it feels like it was a lot longer ago than that. So to get like, oh, a year ago today throws me off. What about you, Trisha? What were some of your favorite parts or the hardest parts?
I will say the hardest part is actually probably the academics. EcoQuest is a very academically demanding course, and I think that's important to know going in, that different abroad programs have different like academic rigor to them. And so like field work is not easy. And I know I'm more of like a social science major, even though I'm like on the social end of the environmental sciences. And this was more of the field and the hard sciences of that end. So it definitely taught me a lot about that. And that was a really difficult learning curve. But I also thought it was important to have like appreciation for like data that's collected that I later analyze as a social scientist. And probably like my favorite part was learning how to snorkel on a marine reserve where all the fish, like it's a non, like you can't fish there. So all these fish are preserved and they can just, like they just exist. And I had never snorkeled before. So it just felt like I was unlocking a whole other world, being able to see underwater and like swim more effectively, because we rented the whole program. Part of the program was you had to rent a wetsuit. And so we all got into wetsuits and just went into the Goat Island Marine Reserve. And it was so spectacular. And then we went out on the open ocean and also observed the fish. We did countings of different types of species of fish to kind of see what the species density were in the marine reserve. So that was just such a spectacular moment that I'll never forget. And I was very fortunate that a few of my friends on the trip also had GoPro cameras, and they were able to capture some of the moments underwater and just like the vibrant colors that the different fish were.
That's so cool. GoPro videos from abroad have become one of my like favorite types of media. I think for me, the best part or the most fun part, I think, was just like living in such a vibrant city. Like I love being in Durham. I grew up in a small town in Rhode Island, so not that dissimilar from Durham, and being able to go abroad and be in such like historic and beautiful, but also like incredibly active and I think more metropolitan than I even expected type of city was really cool. So just learning like the transportation and learning about all the different kinds of food that was there. And there was so much. The food was so amazing. Another one of my favorites was one of the classes that I took was essentially like oriented around field trips, and we would go to different museums and different like concerts or plays, or like we went to the ballet, and it was so amazing. I've never been that much I'm just not that knowledgeable about art, and so I think museums are cool, but they're not something that I always seek out. But to be like walking through this massive museum, and European cities have such a strong history and such a strong collection of art that like we turned the corner and there was just a Monet that like we didn't know was there, but like right in front of you. And it literally like takes your breath away sometimes just to see such amazing pieces and such old architecture and history. I think it also puts into perspective how young the history and the architecture of the United States is, both academically and just personally. Like taking a Hungarian history course that starts at like 600 BC is like very different than any American history course that I've taken. So it definitely provides a much different sort of context and outlook on the history of everything, really. And I think the biggest challenge, and this is probably something that we all went through, and I bring it up even though it should hopefully never happen to anybody again, but I actually think it was a really great learning experience to have to come home early. So we all at some point or another left our programs earlier than expected because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think Caroline, I just know from personal experience, left first. I'm sure Trisha lasted in New Zealand a little bit longer than the rest of us. But looking back, I think I learned so much in those like 24 hours that we had to like pack up and to head home. Just everybody says when you study abroad, you gain a lot of independence and like perspective, like global perspective. And I gained more independence and global perspective from those 48 hours than I did from maybe the rest of the experience combined, because you're doing international travel really not in a panic, but in a like situation where you have to, not where you're doing it for fun. And so to go through that and to go through that with the friends that I had made, honestly, looking back is more sentimental and like happy than it was at the time. But I thought that was something that I'll definitely hold on to and have gotten skills from forever. I don't know if anybody has anything else that they want to add about special experiences or specific memories.
Yeah, I can add a little more. When you were talking about like learning about the history, something really neat and immersive that we were able to do throughout the program, and it's part of the program quite regularly, is that we were able to visit different maraes in New Zealand and learn some Maori. Like we all learned one song and then we would sing it together at the marae we visited, our local marae in Whakatiwai. And then when we were traveling to the South Island, we stayed on a marae for a few days. And we just sat and listened. And we listened to the man who runs the marae, whose name I can't remember right now, unfortunately, tell the stories of his people, because we were like sleeping in a traveling room. So people like regularly come to this marae and like they can sleep in this room. And we weren't allowed to take pictures of it. There was beautiful artwork all on the walls, they were like panels all throughout the building, that had artwork that described stories of different tribes. And so it was such an immersive experience in Maori culture as well. And that's something that I really think stands out, is we learned a lot about the indigenous people and how, like, in New Zealand, we were also able to celebrate Waitangi Day, which was a celebration of the Treaty of Waitangi. And that is like a treaty between the Crown and Maori, like making cultural retributions to like genocide that occurred. So I thought that was also like a really unique experience.
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I was thinking more about the other students that I got to meet. So even though I traveled with 14 other UNH students, we were taking classes with all the exchange students that were studying at our university, as well as students from our university. So 2 of my roommates were from South Korea. We had other students on our floor from Turkey. We were taking classes with students from Italy and from Ireland, from Canada. And obviously we were getting to know the Hungarian students as well. So I think that was one of the great things too, is just being able to spend time with people from so many different places gives you a real appreciation for the culture where you're living and how everybody is experiencing it in different ways, and all pointing out like, oh, this is so interesting, or like so different. And it's like, oh, well, that wasn't different for me, but this is wild. Like, so getting that kind of comparison and context was really nice. And it's great to like still be in touch with those people now and to have been able to make friends that live all across the world. Okay, well, it's just about 4:30, so we won't go on for too much longer. I'll give one more suggestion to drop questions in the chat if you have them. I also left the UNH Global Education page link in the chat, so that's a great spot to sort of start if you want to explore different programs or get into touch with different people. Maybe we'll just leave it with Catherine if you have any advice for students or suggestions if they're interested in being at UNH and studying abroad.
So we will be having an outdoor study abroad fair in the fall, which I'm so excited about. So it's going to be under the tent on the Great Lawn. It's going to be on September 9th, which is a Thursday. The The time should probably be 11 till 4, but we're sort of playing around with it right now. But yeah, so we're so excited outside for, let's just fingers crossed all the weather will be with us. We do have a backup plan if not, but that would be the first thing to do, is come to the fair. We also have study abroad info sessions. Right now they're virtual, where you basically just watch a video, but I'm hoping we'll be able to do some in-person stuff in the fall. But again, we'll have to wait and see. And so those are really the big things, are the fair and the info sessions, because that really is your entry point to the center. And I just really encourage you also to attend some amazing events through our International Students Office on campus. That's another great way to get involved. There's some, again, I always have to think prior to COVID and what's maybe going to happen now, but I know that, there would often be festivals going on all across campus for international students, various events like Chinese New Year, for example, and things like that. So if you ever see anything like that, support it, go along, meet people, and enjoy the international student population, as well as thinking about study abroad as well. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Thank you. That's exciting. I think the first time that I really interacted with my program was at a study abroad fair. So definitely a great place to start. But I don't see any other questions in the chat. So with that, we'll just wrap up. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us and for sharing your experiences and advice and perspective. Anybody who's watching, if you have more questions about study abroad, please do check out that link that I put in the chat. Feel free to reach out, to send an email to someone, even just to your admissions counselor. And if you have any other admissions questions, as always, you can find us on social media at BAUNH Wildcat. And next week we have our last Q&A for the semester. So there's